Okay, stream has started. Welcome. Nobody's here though. I'm just gonna check if everything is okay before I continue. Let's see. Mic check. Mic check. Alright, looks good to me. Okay, I'm gonna be doing learning how to learn. Uh, back to where we left off. Before we could do a quick review of the notes I took last time. So, focus mode and diffuse modes was introduced, like the two different modes of our brain. Focus mode is good for pattern matching and going deep into a concept, and diffuse mode was learning new concepts, and it was not that great for getting deeper into a problem or problem solving, but it was good for learning new concepts, learning new ideas, having new thoughts, stuff like that. And then there was a few tips on how to enter diffuse mode, and here's some that I put. Uh, the what I do when I feel the most creative. It's like when you peer out a window for a while, your brain goes into diffuse mode and you start thinking, have thoughts. And I also said this was kind of unique for me. Is like when you play driving games like GTA, but without any objectives, then you're just roaming around. That kind of puts my brain into diffuse mode as well. Walks, showers, riding as a passenger in a car also help. And some of the examples that they gave was Edison, and who was the other guy? I already forgot his name. Something Dali. Reading. Salvador Dali. They gave examples of those two. They used to sit in a chair, hold an object, and then what would happen is that they would start to fall asleep, and that object would fall out their hand. And as soon as they would fall out their hand, they'd wake up again. But uh, because they were able to fall asleep, it meant that their brain was pretty relaxed and in diffuse mode. So that's how they would get new ideas and thoughts, which they would put into their work. So we left off at a procrastination preview. We watched a little bit, but I honestly can't remember a lot of it. So I'm gonna try rewatching some of the videos. They're not that long. They're like 6 minutes at the max. But I'm gonna turn on a Pomodoro as well, cause why not? All right, I'll just start from the beginning of the chapter.
Everybody has some issues with procrastination because if you're working on something, it means you're not working on a lot of other things. But some people have more issues with procrastination than others. In this video, we're going to give you a little insight into procrastination, why it arises, and a powerful little tool to help you address it. When you look at something that you really rather not do, it seems that you activate the areas of your brain associated with pain. Your brain, naturally enough, looks for a way to stop that negative stimulation by switching your attention to something else. But here's the trick. Researchers discovered that not long after people might start actually working on what they didn't like, that neural discomfort disappeared. So it seems what happens when you procrastinate is something like this. First, you observe and get a cue about something that causes a tiny bit of unease. You don't like it. So to make the sensation go away, you turn your attention from whatever caused that unease. You turn towards something more pleasant. The
I'm gonna
result,
speed it
you
up a
feel
little bit.
happier, temporarily. We're going to talk more about procrastination later on, but in the meantime, I'm going to let you in on a handy little mental tool. This tool is called the Pomodoro. It was invented by Francesco Cirillo in the early
Which I already set
1980s.
up.
Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. The timer you use often looks like a tomato, and really, a timer is all there is to this elegant little technique. All you need to do is set a timer to 25 minutes, turn off all interruptions, and then focus. That's it. Most anybody can focus for 25 minutes. The only last important thing is to give yourself a little reward when you're done. A few minutes of web surfing, a cup of coffee, or a bite of chocolate, even just stretching or chatting mindlessly, allowing your brain to enjoyably change its focus for a while. You'll find that using the Pomodoro technique is very effective. It's a little like doing an intense 25-minute workout at a mental gym, followed by some mental relaxation. Give it a try. Next, we're going to see how one very shy 10-year-old changed her brain.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I'm gonna skip all of that.
Or I bring to mind one of Maxwell's equations. I'm drawing on portions of my long-term memory into my working memory so I can think about it. So the two types of memory, your working memory is centered out of the prefrontal cortex, although as we'll see later, there are also memory is bigger than it actually suck those memories away. You may find yourself shutting your eyes to keep any other items from intruding into the limited slots of your working memory as you concentrate. So we know that short-term memory is something like an inefficient mental blackboard. The other form of memory, long-term memory, is like a storage warehouse. And just like a warehouse, it's distributed over a big area. Different kinds of long-term memories are difficult for you to find the information at the same number of times
Yeah,
about
okay.
learning. This video will be especially fun because I have a chance now to interview my co-instructor, Dr. Terence Zanowski. Terry's pioneering research in neural networks and computational neuroscience have made him a living legend. Dr. Zanowski is an investigator at Howard Hughes Medical Institute and the Francis Crick Professor at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, where he directs the Computational Neurobiology Laboratory. Above and beyond all of that, Dr. Zanowski is also in the elite group of only 10 living scientists to have been elected to all three of the national academies in engineering, science, and medicine. What I think is perhaps most impressive, however, is that Terry has also graduated more computational neuroscientists than any other scientist. In some sense, then, this makes Dr. Terence Zanowski a leading father figure for the modern field of neuroscience. The ultimate goal of Dr. Zanowski's research is to build linking principles from brain to behavior using computational models. Today, I'm going to ask Terry a few questions about how he learns and how he thinks about learning, so that we might all get a better sense of how to improve our own learning. So what do you do to help yourself learn more easily when you're looking at something completely new?
Well, I like to get into the thick of it. I don't get much out of just going and reading a lot of books. And
Same.
when I was in graduate school, I made a transition from physics to biology, and the way I did it was to get into a biology lab and get involved in experiments. And I'm a firm believer in learning by doing and learning by osmosis from people who are experts.
How do you keep yourself paying attention during something like a boring lecture?
I found that there isn't a simple way to keep yourself attending something that you're not interested in, but I have found a little trick to waylay the speaker, and that is by asking a question. And the interruption often gives rise to a discussion that is a lot more interesting, and it actually follows the general principle, which is that you learn a lot more by active engagement rather than passive listening.
So what do you do to get into and take advantage of diffuse mode thinking?
I would say it's hard to ask questions for a lecture that you're not even interested in. See, this is my problem with college in general. You're forced to take classes that you're not interested in, and a lot of the time, they don't even help you for the degree you're going for. Like, I am doing an IT degree, but I had to take geology courses, biology courses, uh, some math courses, but they're all pretty irrelevant to the career path that I've chosen. And when you're forced to sit in a classroom and try to focus on things that you know you're wasting your energy on and they're not going to help you in what you're pursuing, then there's nothing you can really do about it except become a bitch and either conform with the system or just push through it and completely forget about it as soon as the class ends. But what he is talking about is, uh, I would say it's good. It's a good philosophy for something that you want to get into. But unfortunately, I would say for a lot of bachelor's programs, at least in the technical side, because that's what I can attest to, you have to take classes that are unnecessary. And that actually is pretty demotivating for your learning journey. Because if you lose hope in the educational system, then you kind of lose hope in education in general. Because a- as we've grown up, we've been taught that the place to get education is a school or a university. And if you already disagree with what they teach, then it will take you a lot of hard effort to reconstruct your mind about what education really is. I mean, I kind of had to go through that. College was shit for me. School was pretty mediocre for me. Um, what school and college rewards is repetition and following directions set out by others. They don't really push you to experiment, which I think is really what education is about. Like learning how to learn. I mean, this is what the course is, right? I hope they touch into that. Is that sure, repetition is good for learning something, but is it you should repeat things that you actually want to learn? Like if you're taking this course to get better at college, I don't know. Me personally, I think that's a waste of time because college is so versatile in terms of they're teaching you one thing on one day or in one semester, and then the next semester they're like, okay, now forget all of that because I'm a dickhead professor, and I'm gonna teach you my own formulas, and all the formulas you learned in the last class, they're irrelevant because I don't like the way he taught it. So I'm gonna reteach you the same concepts in my own way. And if you use any old formulas from other classes, then I'm gonna fail you. I've had that. I mean, I've had experiences like that. That's why I say it. There's a lot of demotivation when it comes from relying on others to teach you things. So I would say that the biggest lesson for me when it comes to learning is self-sufficiency. But rant over.
I find that when I'm jogging or out getting exercise, that it's a wonderful way to get the mind disengaged from the normal train of thought. And I find that it's very, very possible to sort of come up with new thoughts, new ideas. And it's almost as if your brain
Damn,
goes
you be
into a new
running.
mode. You're running along, things are passing you by, and you start thinking about what's happening. For example, the things that your brain has been working on, your unconscious thoughts bubble to the surface, and often new ideas that are going to be then helpful to you later on. The only problem I have is remembering all those great ideas. Because when I get back and take a shower, then a lot of them have evaporated. And that's why I like to take a little notebook along with me so I can take notes and remember what it is that I was thinking about.
He's really passionate about his work.
So do you multitask? Or if you don't, how do you resist the urge to multitask when you want to multitask?
Well, I wouldn't survive if I couldn't multitask. And most of my day is spent talking with students, listening to lectures, interacting with a lot of people who are passing through, visitors. There's just a lot of things that are bombarding you, email, texting. And these are very important things that you want to do, but if you can't juggle, then it's hard to get through the day. However, I enjoy the evenings when the hubbub of the day quiets down and I get a chance to go into a more reflective mode, and that's when I actually get my best work done.
Do you do two things at the same time ever?
Well, you can't actually do two things consciously at the same time because those will get mixed up. It is possible with a lot of training actually to do two things at once, but it's you're not doing it efficiently. For me, multitasking is being able to switch back and forth, context switching from one topic to another. And some people are better at that than others. In other words, sometimes it takes a while to get into the swing of things. If you're in the middle of writing a paper, for example, it may take hours before you get to the point where you can actually be productive and you're actually able to get something accomplished. But if you can, after getting into the middle of something, switching from that to another task is sometimes very difficult to do if you're middle of something. But I can do that very easily. I can switch back and forth, and I seem to be able to go back to the original task and take up where I left off. So that's
It's something I wanted to mention. A lot of people brag about, oh yeah, I studied for 3 hours or I worked for 5 hours on my project. But what he just said, it kind of like reminded me is think of a car. A car could be moving 5 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. The duration doesn't matter. If you say I drove for 5 hours, if you're driving 5 miles an hour, then you only went 25 miles. But if you drove 50 miles an hour, 5 hour drive would be 250 miles. So it's kind of the same with working or studying. It's you could sit there for a long ass time, but if you can't truly concentrate and focus on what you're doing, then it doesn't matter how long you sit there, that time is useless. Because I don't think time is a good metric to follow when you're doing a project or studying. A good metric to follow would be, I don't know, some percentage or some way to track your progress. Like if I'm building like a Lego tower, right? A good metric for me is like when I started, the tower was right here, and when I finished, the tower is like right here. So like I have this much more to go. So this is how much I've done. I wouldn't say I've been at it for 5 hours. I would say this is how close I am to finishing. Like I'm already up here. I just need a little bit more to finish. So yeah, that's one thing I learned kind of late is that you don't really want to use time as a metric of your success, because some people it would take them 1 hour to complete a task. The same task it would take somebody else 3 hours. So yeah, I don't know.
It's one way of accomplishing a lot, and fortunately, I have a lot of very good students and helpers and enormously productive environment that I'm working in. So it's really a joy to be here.
How do you apply your knowledge of neuroscience to your own learning?
Well, I think there are many little ways that I have applied what I've actually learned in the lab. And let me give you just one example to make it concrete. One of my colleagues here at the Salk Institute, Rusty Gage, made a very important discovery. If you read the textbooks, it'll tell you that all the neurons that you have in your brain, you had at birth. And after birth, the wiring takes place and learning, and it changes the connections between the neurons, but they're the same old neurons that you had when you were born. Some die, so there is a shrinkage of your cortex. However, Rusty discovered that in an important part of your brain for learning and memory, the hippocampus, which is located right in the middle here of this model brain, new neurons are being born even in your adulthood. And since this is very important for learning and memory, it is obviously something that is very, very useful to be able to have new neurons. Now, here's what we discovered together. We discovered that if you have an animal, we use a rat as our model system, and if you give it an enriched environment in which the rat is able to move around and do things and interact with other rats, and then look in the hippocampus, you find that the strengths of the connections between the neurons is much stronger there. It can be made by a factor of 2, much stronger than in a rat that has been kept in a cage where there's impoverished environment. Now, and here's now the key. Okay,
Shit.
so having a rich environment is even as an adult is going to help you, right? Instead of locking yourself in a monk in the room, you really want to be surrounded by other people who are stimulating you and events that are happening that you can actively participate in. So that's important. But now here is something Rusty discovered, which I think is incredibly important, that in the absence of a rich environment, exercise will also increase the number of new neurons that are being born and survive. And so I am very avid at running. I've already mentioned that I get lots of good ideas when I run, but I also know that my brain is helping me remember things because of the fact that I have new neurons being born and surviving in my hippocampus.
I'm gonna write that down. Two main ways to have new neurons being born in your brain at adulthood: exercise and stimulating social environment. slash freedom, move and think as you please. That's interesting. So your brain is in a healthier state if you're free to do as you think and have people around you that are constantly supporting you or stimulating you in some way. But in the absence of that, you could exercise and get the same effects or similar effects, I guess you said. That's pretty interesting.
So that's one of many examples that I can point to in which what we've learned about neuroscientists from neuroscience has really changed the way I think. And it's a pity if you look at the way our new educational reforms in schools, what did they cut out when they want to add a new session on, for example, learning something, for example, how to pass a test, right? Tests are being given now to help
Take out
assess
PE,
how well a student is doing and how well a
physical
school is doing.
education.
Well, it's recess.
Damn,
And what happens
that's
during
even
recess?
worse.
Exercise. It's running around. It's exactly what you need, what your brain needs. It needs that moment of pause, of using your muscles rather than your brain to be able to process that information and get the neurons working on it. So I think that this is, again, something that should be a policy that we need to have our children out there running around.
Have there been any special techniques you've acquired over the years that help you focus, learn, or create more effectively?
Miss recess, bro. I know we had it in elementary school, and so for the American system, for anybody who watches this that's not in America, you have elementary, middle, and high school. Elementary school is from first grade or kindergarten to sixth grade or fifth grade, depending on where you live. And then middle school will be sixth to eighth or seventh to eighth. And then high school would be ninth to 12, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. But after elementary school, there's no more recess. You just have one class after the next, and then the next, and so on and so forth. But you get PE, but PE is an
I
elective
find
that
that's
you have to choose personally. It's not chosen for you, it's not a requirement. And if you're trying to get into a college or a decent college, whatever, you're probably going to opt for taking AP classes, which are college level classes, instead of PE, because that will help you save money when you go to college. And that's just a bullshit system in my opinion. You're being punished for being in poverty, being poor, because if you can't afford to pay for college, you have to study your ass off to save money in the future. Like if you take AP classes in high school, it's free, except the AP exam at the end, which you have to pay for. But uh, that exam is obviously 10 times cheaper than, or however many times cheaper than going to college and paying $5,000 for that one single class. But I agree with them. Like, I was happier and I was probably healthier school wise when they had education plus physical activity as a requirement. Um, Even in middle school, they had PE as a requirement, but recess had gone away. So even when you exercise, it was in a controlled environment in middle school. You weren't allowed to freely roam around and talk to people you want to talk to. Um, and I think that does hinder growth a lot. I agree with him. Of course, I mean he's a neuroscientist, but it's interesting to think about later on, like how these things can affect you and your growth.
being in a creative environment where other people are creative is a way of enhancing your own creativity. I think that although the image we have of the creative thinker as being isolated genius, it may be true of some people, it's not true of me. I really find that I have better ideas if I'm talking to somebody and trying to explain to them my ideas. Often that process it boosts that creative process. And in fact, I think that, having other people around to bounce your ideas off of is really, for me, a very, very important part of doing science.
How about test taking? Any special advice there?
Tests are like any other skill. You can learn them. You can learn to be a better test taker, and you have a lot of good ideas about that. I've discovered that what you need things to avoid, for example, don't get hung up if you can't answer a question, go on to the next, because you can always come back. And in fact, often the answer to the problem that was holding you back may actually pop into your brain later on in the test. This is how our brains work. Things work along parallel tracks.
How do you approach your creative work in science? How do you keep yourself creative in the face of the onslaught of more routine day-by-day tasks?
I've been very fortunate because I have a great lab, and my students and colleagues keep me young in terms of learning new things, looking at things with new perspectives. So I think that having youth around really is a great way to keep yourself youthful.
If you had any advice for a young high school or college student about how to learn effectively, what would you say?
That success isn't necessarily come by being smart. I know a lot of smart people who are not successful. But I know a lot of people who are very, very passionate and persistent. A lot of success in life is that passion and persistence of really staying the course, working on it and not letting go, not giving up. That's really, I think, the most important quality that I see in students that I work with who are successful.
Terry, I cannot thank you enough for your great answers.
Another thing I wanted to say is that uh, about persistence. It should be persistence for your own goals, not goals that somebody else has set out for you. Like, if you're going to college because your parents told you to, or because your friends are going to college. I'm using college as an example because that's the stage of life that I'm in right now. Uh, if you're going to college and doing a degree because somebody else is doing it and you're following that, hoping that you'll achieve the same level of success that your peers did or your parents did when they were in college, then you're not really passionate about it. You're just doing what's secure. So if you find, if you're one of the lucky few to find your passion and pursue it, then for a fact, I think success will come to you because passion naturally brings persistence. If you truly enjoy what you do, then there's no way that you will not succeed. You know, success is written for you because you enjoy something. And it's okay to change your passions as you grow up. Like, that doesn't mean that you failed at achieving a goal. It just means you matured enough to know that this is not for you anymore. This is no longer fun. Like, when I was younger, I was passionate about games and I was passionate about uh, learning how to make games and become a gaming developer. And then I matured a little bit to find out that, yeah, more than likely I will have to work for a game company if I'm a game developer. And if I do develop games for somebody else, then I'll probably have to deal with crunch time and all the BS that comes with it. Um, but I just realized that it's not a passion that or it's not something that I'm so passionate about that I want to pursue. I found other things that are uh, bigger on my priority list, and now I'm pursuing them. I think streaming is one of them for me. Like, obviously, I don't have anything right now, but I've sacrificed some things to make time for streaming because I'm passionate about it. Um, and hopefully this time I can be persistent with it. All right, I heard the Pomodoro go off. I'm gonna take a little break, boy. I read something interesting yesterday about Antarctica that only 25,000 people have gone to Antarctica. And that's like 1 in a million or something. But that was an old documentary. How many people have gone to Antarctica? Oh no, I spelled it wrong. Holy shit. Okay, it's a lot more than what I imagined. 105 to 331,000 people visited Antarctica, which is a significant increase from a few hundred visitors that went in the 1950s. They arrive by cruise ship and most only visit areas along the Antarctic Peninsula that are close to the shore. Cruises. There's cruises that actually go to Antarctica. I didn't know that. That would be interesting. That reminded me, there was like some penguin in Japan or something. Man with the backpack. Yeah, it was this one.
It's happening in Japan. Meet Lala, a 10-year-old king penguin who used to call the Antarctic home. Lala lives here with the Nishimoto family. And this king penguin is really living like a king. He's got his own room complete with a powerful air conditioner and free run of the property.
We're living
But
the best
Lala
life.
isn't your average couch penguin. He likes to travel. That's when the Nishimotos help pack him up for a trip into town.
Yeah, bro. Hey, I'm walking it.
When Lala hits the road, his favorite destination is no surprise. Where else? The fish store.
That's crazy. Holy crap. Motherfucker just gulped it up.
Sardines and mackerel are his favorites. He loves to eat them. He is adorable.
Adorable, yes, and deserving of a doggy bag for the trip home. Lala grew up in the cold Antarctic and now lives in a city known for its heat and humidity.
That's crazy.
As he heads home, he seems to pause at this soda machine. Then moves on, possibly realizing he left his change in his other suit. No problem, just head into a neighbor's yard for a quick hose down. Ah, refreshing. Then back on the road.
That's wild.
Once home, Lala gets his knapsack unpacked, checks out his room,
Bro, I'm slow.
and at the end of a long day, spends a little quality time with the rest of the family.
Bro, that seems like a good life. That's crazy. That's all I got. I can't think of anything else. I want to watch that. It's been a while since I've seen it though. There was another one. Penguin escapes killer whales. I've shown this one before.
A couple was on a whale watching expedition off the tip of Antarctica, checking out these killer whales, when they noticed one little penguin who was in quite the rush.
Swim, Jimmy, swim.
He's running from the killer whales. He doesn't want to end up as lunch.
That did not sound well.
Damn, look at that.
Oh,
There's
the
two of
penguin's
them.
Go, penguin.
That's when Jimmy
know
makes
that.
a jump for it. He's trying to get in the boat.
It almost did. I think I got it. Oh, it's still going.
Let's try that again. Not quite.
Damn.
One more time.
Let's go.
He's in. Keep swimming, little buddy.
The penguin is in the boat. He's in the boat. What are we gonna do with him? Well, I don't know. Save him.
This penguin said, "Not today, orcas."
Yay!
That's crazy. Penguin got saved. Alright, I'm gonna just go down the rabbit hole again. So let me stop myself there.
That I think people will find very helpful.
Wonderful. Now, I want to just give a little intro here. I'd like to introduce you to Francis Crick's brain. So I first met Francis 30 years ago, and this brain was sitting in his office. And Francis was a close colleague of, I moved here about 25 years ago and got to know Francis much, much better. And one day, we were chatting, and Francis pointed out this brain that had been sitting there for decades and said, Terry, do you know that I just recently realized that this brain is actually much bigger than a real brain? And in fact, you could not fit this brain in my skull if you actually look at the relative sizes. This is a teaching tool for medical students. You can take apart the different parts of the brain. But isn't it interesting that Francis Crick didn't realize that until much, much later when he actually looked at it with new eyes. And so, this is something about learning with fresh new eyes.
Isn't it extraordinary? Even a Nobel Prize-winning discoverer of DNA.
Well, there are things to discover every day about things around us, ordinary things that you just have to look at them with a different set of eyes, a different perspective.
Summary video. So this module is basically done.
Although living brains are pretty complex, this week we've used metaphor and analogy and zombies to help simplify matters. In essence, people have two fundamentally different modes of thinking that, for the purposes of this course, we've labeled focused and diffuse. We used a simple pinball analogy to help us understand the differences between the modes. The focused mode has tight spacing for the rubber bumpers, which seems to, in some sense, help keep your thoughts concentrated. The diffuse mode, on the other hand, has more widely spaced bumpers that allow for more broad-ranging ways of thinking. The focused mode is centered more in the prefrontal cortex, and it often seems to involve thinking about things you're somewhat familiar with. For example, if you're familiar with multiplication and you're trying to solve a multiplication problem, or you're trying to find a word that rhymes with another word, you're probably stepping along the somewhat familiar pathways of the focused mode. But if you're trying to solve or figure out something new, it often cries out for the more broad-ranging perspectives of the diffuse mode. This mode, as it turns out, is representative of the brain's mini neural resting states. Creative thinkers throughout history, whatever their discipline, have found ways to access the diffuse mode often more directly and quickly. But we all access this mode quite naturally when we do things like go for a walk or take a shower or even just drift off to sleep. When we find ourselves stuck on a problem, or even if we're unsure of a situation in the course of living our daily life, it's often a good idea, once you've focused directly on the situation, to let things settle back and take a bit more time. That way, more neural processing can take place, often below conscious awareness in the diffuse mode. The thing is, it often takes time for neural processing to take place, and time as well to build the new neural structures that allow us to learn something new. This is why tackling procrastination is so very important. The easiest way to tackle procrastination is to use the Pomodoro technique, that brief 25-minute stretch of focused concentration followed by a bit of mental relaxation. It's through practice and repetition that we can help enhance and strengthen the neural structures we're building as we're learning something new. Practice and repetition is particularly important for more abstract topics. Memory, of course, is an important aspect of learning. There are 4 slots in our working memory. Things can fall out of those slots unless we keep repeating them to hold them in mind. In that sense, working memory is like a not very good blackboard. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is like a storage warehouse. If you've practiced and repeated something well enough to get it into long-term memory, you can usually call it up later if you need it, although you may need an occasional bit of repetition to freshen the memory up. It's never a good idea to cram your learning by repeating things many times all in one day, because that's like trying to build muscle by lifting weights all in one day. There's no time for solid structures to grow. We've also learned of the importance of sleep in washing away the toxins that develop during our day's activities. You want to avoid taking tests or doing anything difficult with little sleep the night before, because it's like trying to think with poison on the brain. And just as importantly, exercise is surprisingly valuable in helping improve both our memory and our ability to learn. We've had a lot of fun while learning this week. I'll bet you'll find next week's material to be even more exciting. I'm Barbara Oakley. Thanks for learning how to learn.
Okay, so we're basically done with this module. If you had to select one most interesting and useful topic that was covered in this week's video, what would you choose? Focus versus diffuse, modes of thinking, importance of practice, exercise. That's the most for me. Come on, bro, submit it.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann, one of the
Excitement, but what's next? I could just find out, bro. It's quite common to get stuck on a problem often because you have initial ideas about what the solution should be that block your ability to see the real solution. Which of the following are good next best step to take when you've already spent time reanalyzing the problem by focusing intently? Take a little break. Yeah, that's the only one. True statement which correctly completes a sentence. After you become an expert at using the Pomodoro technique, you should continue to use Pomodoro when you have difficulty learning or subject or getting yourself motivated to get started on a task. But make sure to also take breaks in between. Start doing more and more Pomodoro sessions. Be able to easily make a paste with rich tomato sauce. Okay. In the blank mode, the brain makes random connections in a relaxed fashion. That's diffuse. Select the following statements regarding procrastination. After you do a Pomodoro session, reward isn't important. When you don't want to work on something, a sense of neural discomfort arises. Yeah, this is true. Not longer after you start working, the neural discomfort disappeared. While you're doing Pomodoro session, it's alright to take a quick look at other. No, everybody has some issues with procrastination. First video described focus mode and diffuse mode. According to this video, the focus mode is affiliated with wheel drawing upside down in order to focus on detailed ideas, concepts, problem solving techniques that are at least somewhat familiar. Pinball machine that has bumpers which are very tightly grouped. Yep. True statements about sleep. Taking a test without enough sleep, it means you're operating with a brain that's got metabolic toxins. It's better to go without sleep and cram what you can into your brain. Nope. When you sleep, your brain cells shrink, which allows toxins to be more easily washed away. Dreaming about something that doesn't improve your ability to understand it. That's not true. Sleep has been shown to make a remarkable difference. Yeah. Select the following true statements about memory. You boot things into your memory by repeating something 20 times in one evening. It won't stick nearly as well if you practice the same number of times over several days. Long-term memory is like an inefficient mental blackboard. No, intense paleo learning where you rub a where you rub a fossil while trying to learn something new is an excellent way of lodging something into your memory. Nope. Long-term memory is like a storage warehouse. Repetition is needed so your metabolic vampires don't suck the memories away. Select the following true statements about practice according to the modules videos. Together through repeated use. Practice is less. Man, they got so many questions. Okay. We're just gonna quickly go through this because this modules videos have tried to make some important points. Okay. Which of the following statements is true? Hey, let's go. Wow. I don't get shit for this. Oh, I don't care about all that. Nope. Nope. Damn, they got so many interviews.
Daphne Grant grew up in.
Yeah, I'm done with this module. Chunking.
This week, we're going to be talking about chunks, compact packages of information that your mind can easily access. We'll talk about how you can form chunks, how you can use them to improve your understanding of and creativity with the material, and how chunks can help you do better on tests. We'll also talk about illusions of competence in learning. This is when you're using ineffective study methods that fool your mind into thinking you're learning something when you're mostly just wasting your time. We'll cover what those less effective study methods are and tell you what methods research has shown will work better to help you in your studies. Finally, we'll talk about something called overlearning, which can solidly ingrain information in your mind, but also can be a little like digging deeper ruts as you might spin your wheels ineffectively in learning. You can make your study time more valuable by interleaving, providing intelligent variety in your studies. I'm Barbara Oakley. Thanks for learning how to learn.
Okay. Create a new page. Module 2.
In this video, we're going to answer the question, what is a chunk? When you first look at a brand new concept, it sometimes doesn't make much sense, as shown by the jumbled puzzle pieces here. Chunking is the mental leap that helps you unite bits of information together through meaning. The new logical whole makes the chunk easier to remember and also makes it easier to fit the chunk into the larger picture of what you're learning. Just memorizing a fact without understanding or context doesn't help you understand what's really going on or how the concept fits.
Bro, low-key, I'm bored as hell. I don't wanna do this anymore. I know this is not gonna stick in my head anymore. So I'm just gonna chill for a little bit. It's crazy because like I'm not used to learning like I used to in school, like constant barrage of information just being pushed at you. And when you have to just sit down for a while and focus on something, it just takes out all your energy. It's mad draining, I'm not gonna cap. But this is good. I know if I keep doing this, I'll get better at it. But I also know when to stop. And this is a point to stop. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. It just got me thinking, why do we need a course like this to exist? Like, why is it that we're so bad at learning by default? I mean, it must have to do with our upbringing, right? Like, apart from just wanting to learn hard things, um, causing pain in our brain, there has to be something that takes us out of the loop. I really do think it's the abrupt end to learning from school to jumping into a job. Like, you're in school for so long and you're taught that, like what I was saying earlier, that if you want to learn something, you go to school. And then suddenly you're like, okay, now you have to earn money to survive. So go do a job. And then that abrupt end between your education and your need to survive, uh, the abrupt end to your education and the start of your necessity, your your fuck, how do I say this? The abrupt end to your education and the start of your adulthood, where your need to survive begins to rise as the highest priority, comes about, then you completely start neglecting education, and then a few years later, you're unwilling to learn because all you remember from school are bad experiences when it comes to learning, and learning itself just being hard, anyways. Um, so it got me thinking, and I was wondering, like, why is the education system set up in such a way that you have to rely on a school to learn things? Why is that the only method of learning for children? Um, and if it is the only method of learning, why is it so rigid? And if I remember correctly, there was a whole thing about Rockefeller's influence on uh, the education system. Yeah, Rockefeller, the oil magnate, Rockefeller influence on education. There was a whole thing about this, how Rockefeller's stupidity reshaped education.
What's the point of education? I mean, really, what's the point? To learn to read, write, and arithmetic, but for what purpose?
Hold on, bruh. Let me just go to Chat GPT. It can give me better answers. Did Rockefeller have an influence on American educational system? Oh God, okay. John D. Rockefeller had a significant influence on the American educational system, particularly through his philanthropy and the establishment of institutions that shaped modern education. In 1902, Rockefeller founded the GEB, General Education Board, with an initial endowment of $1 million, aimed to support education at all levels across the United States. All of this sounds good on paper. Support for black education, funding black colleges. Did he have an ulterior motive? The American educational system is subject of debate among historians and scholars. While Rockefeller's contributions to education were undeniably significant and beneficial, some have speculated about potential underlying motives that went beyond pure philanthropy. Here are a few perspectives. Social control and stability. Rockefeller was a leading figure in American industry, particularly in the oil business, where he amassed unprecedented wealth. Some critics argue that his investments in education were driven by the desire to create a more stable, productive workforce that would benefit industrial capitalism. By supporting education, particularly in the South, Rockefeller may have aimed to reduce social unrest and promote a more compliant, skilled labor force, which would in turn benefit the industrial economy. Some believe that Rockefeller's educational initiatives were aimed at promoting certain values such as discipline, hard work, and obedience, traits that were conducive to the needs of industrial employers. This could be seen as a way to indicate a sense of order and discipline in society. Uh, Yeah, public image, securing lasting legacy, blah blah blah. While there is evidence to suggest that Rockefeller's philanthropic efforts in education might have had strategic benefits for his business interests and legacy, it's difficult to pinpoint a single ulterior motive. So, where does the idea of obedience and a dictator like environment in public schools of America come from? I'm just saying it as I saw it, you know? Like, I don't have any gripes, or, well, I have many gripes actually, but it's not something that eats me away, but it just makes me curious as to why it is the way it is. So the idea roots in several historical, philosophical, and social developments. Perception is often linked to the ways in which education systems were designed to serve broader societal and economic needs, particularly during the Industrial Revolution and the Progressive Era, which Rockefeller is from. So all of this shit started in the Industrial Revolution. Modeling schools on factories. Fuck me, bro. So they're literally conditioning you to go work at a factory. As the United States industrialized in the 19th century, early 20th century, schools began to adopt organizational and operational structures similar to factories. The emphasis was on efficiency, uniformity, and discipline, basically taking away your what makes you unique, um, and human, in a sense. A disciplined society is an inhuman society, in my opinion. Sure, things are more uniform and they work more efficiently, but the people that do the work of efficiency are so damn lost. Schools were seen as institutions to produce disciplined, punctual, and obedient workers who could fit seamlessly into the industrial workforce. This led to the adoption of more rigid and authoritarian structure in schools. Fuck. I don't need that Pomodoro anymore. Bell system and rigid schedules, the use of bells to signal the beginning and end of classes, the rigid segmentation of the school day, and the hierarchical nature of the teacher-student relationship mirrored the organization of factory work. This structure reinforced a system of authority and control, which some critics argue stifled creativity and individuality. Progressive era educational reforms, scientific management in education. There was a strong emphasis on efficiency, standardization, and scientific management. Ideas popularized by figures like Frederick Winslow Taylor. Who the hell is Frederick Winslow Taylor? American mechanical engineer. Taylor believed that it was the role and responsibility of manufacturing plant managers to determine the best way for the workers to do a job and to provide the proper tools and training. Science, not rule of thumb. Harmony, not discord. Cooperation, not. Okay, this is good for factories, I'll agree. Maximum output in place of restricted output. Alright, I'll get into what he did later. Educational reformers applied these principles to schools, advocating for a standardized curriculum and teaching methods that were believed to be more scientific and efficient. This is bad, bro. I mean, to me, it's bad because I'm a strong believer of individualism, and I'm a big part of the Western philosophy of you do your own thing and I'll do my own thing, you know. But obviously, that's not what runs the world. Okay, social efficiency movement. This movement, led by educators like Elwood P. Cubberley, argued that schools should prepare students to fit predetermined social roles. The curriculum was often designed to produce obedient, productive citizens who would conform to societal norms and contribute to the economy. This approach to education prioritized conformity and obedience over critical thinking and individualism. Yo, fuck this guy. This what an ass. I just want to know how much she made. Unlike industrialists or prominent businessmen of his era, Coverley's wealth primarily derived from his academic career and his work in educational administration. Okay, he didn't die a rich man, so I don't know, bro. I don't know why you do that to people. Okay, so we already read about Rockefeller. Flexner Report, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, Flexner Report on medical education had a significant impact on the professionalization and standardization of medical schools. Though not directly related to general public education, it exemplifies a broader trend of applying business principles to education, which had the effect of reinforcing hierarchical authoritarian structures. I don't know anything about med school, but I know people in med school and they don't seem happy. um, People in passing, I don't know anybody directly nowadays. Authoritarian teaching methods, traditional pedagogy. How do you pronounce this? Is it pedagogy? Practice of teaching.
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy. Method and practice of teaching. Historically, teaching methods in the US often reflected an authoritarian model, where teachers were seen as the sole authority figures and students were expected to passively receive information. This model emphasized discipline, order, and respect for authority, contributing to the perception of schools as environments that prioritize obedience. Corporal punishment. Until recently, corporal punishment was a common practice in American schools, further reinforcing the idea of schools as places where strict obedience was demanded and enforced through authoritarian means. I mean, I'm not saying any other country is better than the American educational system. I mean, where I come from, it's not much different, you know. So a lot of people, a lot of countries follow this same methodology for teaching children how to behave in society, but I don't think it's the right way of doing it. I'll make sure stream looks okay. Paulo Freire's critique. Educational theorists like Paulo Freire criticize traditional educational systems for being banking models of education, where students are treated as empty vessels to be filled with knowledge. Freire argued that this approach suppresses critical thinking and perpetuates social inequalities by teaching students to conform rather than question. I agree. I don't even think the teachers know what they're doing because the curriculum is passed down from the board itself. So the teachers just follow the curriculum given to them. I think very rarely do they get the chance to make changes to the curriculum, especially in universities. The Some of the classes I took had lectures from early 2000s, late 90s because the curriculum demanded a strict guideline for what should be presented. And to change those guidelines is a process in itself. You need you need approvals from several levels of the hierarchy before you could change a curriculum for a class, which is unfortunate in my opinion. I think education should be freeform. It should be about critical thinking, and it should be about uh, a person's uniqueness. I mean, I think collectivism is important, but collectivism should come from multiple people who are passionate about the same thing coming together as a collective and working on that passion rather than people being forced to uh, have a passion they don't even want but what society wants, you know. it's hard to put it into perspective. It's like you're born, like what he said, Paulo, what he said, like you're born an empty vessel, and then somebody comes and fills it up with things that are necessary for what they desire. Not necessarily what the student desires, but what the teacher or the board, the education system desires of the student. All right, John Dewey's advocacy for progressive education. In contrast, John Dewey and other progressive educators advocated for a more democratic and student centered approach to education. They argued that education should foster critical thinking, creativity, and active participation in society rather than mere obedience. Despite these progressive ideas, a more authoritarian model has often persisted in many parts of the US. The authoritarian Does the authoritarian model persist throughout the world, or is this an American thing? Most people are submissive, so I would say it persists throughout the world. Authoritarian model of education is not unique to the United States. It has persisted in various forms across the world. However, the prevalence and intensity of this model vary widely depending on cultural, historical, and socio-economic factors. Many Asian countries' education systems have traditionally been more authoritarian. Asia, especially India, in my opinion. The reason I say that is because the Indian population is prevalent in the tech industry, and yeah, the a lot of them, the a lot of my Indian coworkers, I speak to them, and this is throughout many jobs, and they all agree they don't like what they do, but they still do it because that's what they went to school for, and that's what they know is the best way to make money. But I don't think that's the best way to make money. It's just somebody has given you a sense of security that if you do this, you'll make money to survive. So if somebody tells them that, well, I shouldn't say just them, like everybody that I've worked with feels similar. Like they don't necessarily enjoy their jobs, but they do them because the sense of security that comes with the money they get. But I feel like they could make a lot more money if they just use their mind, their unique mind, to come up with ideas. But the stress is too much to do that. So they stick with the job and they do what is bringing in the money already. All right. European countries show a mixed picture. In countries like Germany and France, traditional education models have been more rigid with a strong emphasis on teacher authority. However, progressive educational models have also gained ground, particularly in Scandinavian countries, Finland, Sweden. Each emphasize student-centered learning. Guess where Linux was made? Linux that's used by Google, Facebook, um, everybody in tech, right? It was made in uh, the University of Helsinki, which I think is in Finland. Yeah, Helsinki. Helsinki. Yeah, it's in Finland. So the critical thinkers are the ones that make these inventions. And I could be wrong about this. I know Unix was made in America. Where was Linux made? The University of Helsinki. Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is that, like, I know it's just one example, and there's been many inventions in America too. But if you give the people a chance, smart people a chance to really explore how intelligent they are, they can make extraordinary things. Latin America, many countries follow authoritarian educational models. Middle East is definitely authoritarian, especially in regions where any place that is religious will have an authoritarian educational model. It's just the way things go. Like because already you're born into a rigid set of rules, you know, and Guess what? Majority of the world is religious. You're born into a rigid set of rules set by the religion, and then on top of that, you go to school, which throws more rules at you of obedience or demanding obedience. But I think things will change, especially with the internet. Like now, I'm here, some random dude on the internet, talking to a camera, and I can say whatever I like. Of course, there will be consequences if I say something wrong, but I can say whatever I like, and I can instill my thoughts into your head. And sometimes, if there's a chat, your thoughts, if you chat to me, could be instilled in my head. And now there's a diffusion of thoughts. We're not being obedient to one another. We're having a conversation, although it's a weird form of communication. It's still better than the one sided conversation between a teacher who's talking down to a student about what they want the student to learn. See, if it's a balanced playing field, there will be a diffusion of knowledge. A diffusion of knowledge is best for everybody, um, because that's how things get created. Linux was created from Unix, so there was a diffusion of knowledge between Unix and Linus Torvald, the guy who made Linux, uh, to pick up Unix and build his own thing on top of it. Cultural and historical influences. Cultural norms in many societies uh, emphasize respect for elders, hierarchy, and social order naturally. And social order naturally lend themselves to more authoritarian educational models. This is often seen in societies with strong communal values, where education is viewed as means of socializing young people into established societal roles. I just don't agree with that, bro. Like, it shouldn't be the only way to live in society. Because Newton, even though I don't really like the way he lived his life, because he lived in isolation, Newton rejected society, but everybody still knows that he's the person who theorized about gravity and proved it. He's the person who made like so many inventions and so much. He accomplished so much for the human race. Yet he wasn't part of society like a normal person was. Later on, sure. Later on, he was treated like a god, but in his early years, he was rejected by society, and he accepted that he's not part of society. Hell, he probably even died a virgin, but that's a different story. But all I'm trying to say is like he was isolated because he refused to follow cultural norms, and I think it's best if you don't follow some cultural norms. You shouldn't reject all norms because nobody will like you then, and that's not a good place to be mentally. Like they were saying in the course, you need some sort of social connection to to have new neurons being born in your brain. But yeah, I'm just going off on a tangent now. Progressive education movements. Globally, there has been significant movement towards more progressive education models, particularly since the mid 20th century. These models advocate for student centered learning, critical thinking, creativity, and democratic participation in the classroom. That's the other thing. In a public school, sometimes you're held back, a lot of times you're held back by the slowest student in the classroom. Um, because, like, let's be honest, not everybody that's in your classroom wants to be in that classroom. Sometimes even you. I didn't want to be in the class that I was in. I was forced to be there because that was the law, right? So you're putting a bunch of kids together who don't really give a shit about what they're learning, and then you expect them to conform and learn things. And yeah, they're just not going to do it. And if they do it, they'll half ass it. So let's say you're in a group project, you're interested, genuinely interested in the subject matter, but two other people in your group, 2 out of 4 people in your group are not interested. You're not going to have a good project outcome because 2 of the people don't give a shit, and the other 2 will end up overworking to finish the project. That'll be you and the other guy or girl who's passionate about the project. And guess what? Same shit happens at a job. 1 or 2 people are passionate about the work they do, and the rest don't give a shit. They're just there to collect a paycheck. So the two who are passionate, or the two who are not even passionate, but they're more obedient, submissive, sometimes passionate, uh, they would do the hard work while the other people just do the easy shit to get the paycheck and go home. And more power to them, because that's just the way the system is set up. They probably did the same shit in school. And I mean, I respect that. There were some classes where I did the same thing, where you cheat off of other people, you let other people do more work because you already don't want to be there. You're forced to be there in a sense. Um, but there comes a point in your life where you have the choice to end that cycle, break that cycle of being forced to be in places where you don't want to be in, and actually focus on yourself and do things you actually want to do for once in your life. And once you get to that point in life, my personal belief, because I'm not there yet, but I'm really close. Once you get to that point in life, you really start realizing who you are as a person and what you can actually accomplish. Because now you're using your full power into something that you're actually passionate about. Yeah. All right, I'm drained. I talked a lot this stream, but it felt good. So I'm gonna just call it a stream here, and I'll see you when I see you. Peace out.